We are live.
All right, in three, two, one. Hello, hello. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon to wherever you are in the world. I am your co-host, Mr. Half Man, Half Amazing, the awkward, awesome one, Mr. Main Event. I'm not number three, not number two. Why? Because I'm number one, Malik Miles, here on your podcast waves. And to my left, right,
On
where,
the screen, I
where?
think I appear to the left.
Okay, cool. To my left, my co-host. Please
The man on
introduce
the
yourself.
left with one name, the one and only, Edon, back again with another episode, breaking down the news and all the happenings in the UFC and MMA.
That is correct. And so we are the Conflict Management Podcast. If you don't know, now you know. Um, one of the things that I wanted to talk about, one of the things I feel like is like a big topic of conversation right now is the pound for pound rankings and like who's in it, who's number one, what does it all mean? So for anyone who doesn't know, so pound for pound, whether you're a boxing fan or a UFC fan, it's pretty much just a conversation about like if you take all the fighters across all the divisions, you make them the same weight, who comes out on top? Who is the number one, right? And I think that you let me know your opinions on this, but I think that nowadays the term pound for pound gets tossed around very casually now. Like I think it almost gets tossed around too casually
Mm.
where people just be like, oh yeah, this guy's pound for pound, this pound for pound. Or like, oh, you beat the pound for pound guy, now you're pound for pound. Even if you don't necessarily like, I don't think necessarily if you beat the pound for pound guy, you are now pound for pound. I think it definitely boosts you up in the rankings. Like I think if you're number 9 and you beat number 1, that's amazing. And that is like something that's a nice feather in the cap. But you're like, hey, I did this thing that nobody else could. And I think it should
Mm.
move you up in the rankings, maybe like to 5 or 4, whatever it is. But I don't think you go from 9 until like to number 1. Like, what do you think?
Yeah. So, I mean, the whole conversation is interesting because, like, this week it's become very serious for some reason.
Yeah,
Uh, like, just the conversation around Islam and John Jones, the way that Dana kind of handled that question has made this like a really serious thing when I think a lot of people just forget that it's supposed to be something for fun. It's not supposed to be like a serious thing. There's no like belt that you can give somebody for being number one pound for pound. It's it's supposed to just be like a fun kind of sports bar barbershop kind of conversation between fans about like, okay, well, what if this guy fought this guy? Like what if Superman fought Goku? Like it's supposed to be that type of conversation because typically the guys you're talking about in pound for pound rankings are usually too far away in terms of weight or size to really actually have a real match that anybody would consider like on equal footing. So it's supposed to be a fun thing. I feel like it's kind of turned into not so much of that. It's turned into like a very serious thing where someone can actually hold it almost when it's not really that in reality.
I think that I think in the past, I do agree that it's like generally just, it's not like an actual title connected to it. And it does have this like Goku versus Superman type of feeling to it, right? But I think that it's something that in the past, I feel like it was largely that kind of like, oh, this is just for fun. Cause usually the people normally who were in pound for pound in the past were like people who had already kind of retired or like they were in
Mm.
like semi-retirement when it was like GSP versus like Anderson Silva, those dream matches, like who would be on top wherever. And I think nowadays, I think it's more of a milder thing where it's like I do think it's a what how do you call it like being in the Hall of Fame. I think it's like one in my opinion, I think it's like one step below like Hall of Fame. I think that I think being pound for pound number one is like a big deal. Like I think whenever you were in the top 5, I think it's like a big deal. It's like saying that like, hey, amongst all of like I don't know how many people are in the UFC, like 1,000, couple hundred like 500, however many people who are in the UFC, amongst these, let's say for the sake of simplicity, 700 people, right? Amongst all 700 of these people of the like the world's best martial artists, you are number one. Like you are the best amongst them. And I think that the pound for pound number one holds like a special spot for a lot of fighters because that means even amongst, fans could say you're the best all day, every day till the cows come home. But to have your peers and to have like or just the world think like, oh, this, regardless of weight class, this guy is the best. Because I think that what comes with being number one pound for pound is like you are now eligible for the Mount Rushmore conversation. You know what I mean? Like when you are number one, at least to me, I think that if you are pound for pound number one, that means you are now eligible for that MMA Mount Rushmore. So when they talk about the John Joneses, the George St. Pierre's, the Anderson Silvas, these like legendary, iconic fighters, you can now say like, oh, you can put yourself up on that mountain, and there should be generally no arguments about like who is there or like test your validity, right? And I think number two is like you are one title fight or like maybe a few fights away from being in that conversation as well. Because I think one and two, one is a bigger deal, and I feel like should be like fairly close in that. Where I think that I know, like you had mentioned, you had brought up the whole Islam versus John Jones. For a while, they put Islam as pound for pound number one, which I personally don't necessarily agree with. I think Islam's like a great fighter, and I think he is. Will he be eventually pound for pound number one? I think so. I think he could get there because he's a phenomenal wrestler. He's a really great fighter. He's put together a strong performance. 25-1. Do I think I think he's in the top five for sure, but for a while, I feel like I just don't think he's pound for pound number one yet because, like I said, I think when you are pound for pound number one, that means you could put yourself in the conversation of being on the Mount Rushmore with George St. Pierre, Anderson Silva, John Jones, and I don't think he's reached that level yet. And I felt this way for a while. I know some people disagree, some people agree, disagree, but I think that when Dana just recently said, "Hey, John Jones is the number one pound for pound guy," I think that's just, if we're going off all facts, no feelings, that is the correct decision. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I'd like to hear what you think, but I think that is the correct decision just because of before I get into like the all facts no feelings sides of it. When I know there was jabs back and forth between like Islam saying like, "Oh man, look at these people that I fought in the last 2 years and look at the people you fought in the last 2 years. There's no discussion that I'm number one." Which I was like, that's not a really, I feel like that's that argument. Well, I do think Islam's a really great fighter. I don't know if that conversation really holds water when it comes to pound for pound of being like, oh, look who I've fought in the last 2 years. Look at who have you fought in the last 2 years. It's like, I don't think that really, I think when you're talking about who's the best person in the UFC, I don't know if that really holds too much water per se.
Well, I
But
think
like,
he's
what do
just
you?
trying to say, like, look at how much activity I have over this period, and then look at the names that are on it. Because, like, he's got Volkanovski and Oliveira and Poirier, and he's got these, like, big name guys who are super talented
Mm,
on his resume now. But I think the thing, it's interesting to have this conversation because it's two guys who are in very different parts of their careers. So John is most certainly, by the way that he speaks, towards the end of his career, and Islam is in the prime of his career. So it's at this point in your career where, if you're in your prime, you're supposed to be building out your resume now for your like all-time kind of status. So this should be where you're getting the bulk of the largest names on your resumes right now. And he's kind of doing that. But the problem with that is you're comparing it to John, who we can't really have any evidence. Now, he hasn't been super active, but that hasn't really been much his fault, given he's had an injury that's supposed to keep him out like a year. So,
Literally tore
you,
the pectoral muscle off his bone,
yeah,
if I'm not mistaken.
you can't knock John for inactivity in a sort of fictitious belt conversation because of an injury. That's not really fair, and that's not really in this. Like, injuries aren't really in the spirit of pound for pound rankings. Neither really is inactivity, especially when we're talking about, like, you know, who's pound for pound the best. It's already an acceptance that you're stripping away some of the factors of reality, because nobody really thinks that if John Jones and Islam fought, that Islam would beat John Jones, because everyone said, well, he's way too big for him, it wouldn't work. So if we're going to strip away the reality of some of the size limitations anyway, in order to lift someone up and admire their skills, to me, you can't also go, well, you haven't had that many fights in the past like 3 years. Also, there's other limiting factors in the past 3 years. I mean, if someone actively chose, like, because he's never said it, but John didn't have any fights during the pandemic, and he said that it was because, or he didn't really say, but it's basically implied it's because he was getting larger for the challenge at heavyweight. But I could also see a factor where he might not have wanted to fight during the pandemic. I think that's a very reasonable thing, and that wouldn't take you off of any pound for pound list for me. So
Mhm.
some of that activity is really not on him, and some of that activity could just be like a personal medical choice. And in that sense, you can't really knock John for the inactivity, especially then you're going to look at his resume and all of the names. Like, if you want to go name for name, you can't play that game with John Jones. John Jones will beat
Mhm.
you all day. He's cleared out multiple generations of massive names of like pioneers of the sport, of title holders, and guys who are thought of as all-time sort of greats of one of the premier weight classes that MMA has ever had.
Mhm. Yeah, because when I was looking at it, right, this gets into the all facts, no feelings. But with just looking at, like, because I think that when talking about, like you said, um, the weight limitations, and I think that's one of the, I guess, the parts that makes the whole pound for pound conversation, like, I guess, really fun or interesting, is like taking people who are in drastically different weight classes, but saying like, okay, if they were the same weight, like same whatever, you know what I mean? Their
Mm.
best skills against their best skills, even if you like, so if you made Islam like a heavyweight, right? Like, what would happen in this kind of scenario? Even looking at like the statistics of it all, right? I think and I think the biggest thing that separates Islam and John, right?
Mm.
Other than everything else, but I guess this gets into like this, the facts go feelings part is that if you look, Islam is, if I'm not mistaken, Islam has been in the UFC since 2015, if I'm not mistaken, right? So
Mm.
that is, let's see, like May 20, like 9 years, right?
Mm.
Eight, depending on like if how you count it, right? And if we look at the same, and then the same amount of time for John Jones, right? Let's give him the 9, right? I think his debut was like May 23rd, 2015, right? So I think
Mm.
that makes like nine years.
Yeah.
Let me just double check. The So if you're giving him that 9 year gap or that 8 year time, let's see. Boom, 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 boom. Yeah, his first fight in the UFC was May 23rd, 2015. So if that's 9 years and you're looking at the same 9 year snapshot of John Jones's career, in 9 years, Islam has fought in 4 people of notice, like 4 people of like notable stature, right?
Mm.
So he's fought in, he beat Dustin Poirier, future Hall of Famer, right? Which
Mm.
is an impressive win. He beat Volkanovski, another very impressive win. Um, and then he's beaten So Volk, Dustin, Charles Oliveira, who's like also three people who are future Hall of Famers, right? Which is
Mm,
a big thing, which is a good thing. And Bobby Green, who I think is someone who you could put on that list of like notable names you've beaten, right?
mm,
But in 9 years, he's only had four notable names that, as far as fights, that he's like won.
mm,
And but when you look at John Jones in that same 9 year snapshot, John Jones has fought in a murderer's row of fighters where he's you could go on for days, right?
mm.
Whether it was Shogun, Quentin Rampage, DC, Glover, right? And when you even look at like the weight classes, like what they've done in their respective weight classes in that same 9 year span, John Jones had 13 title defenses in light heavyweight in his division over that same like 9 year span, or 10 if you're looking at, right.
Mm.
Let's say, let's give him the 13, right. Islam has had one title defense in his division. John Jones has had 13, like in his division, right. While
Mm.
and then the other two defenses of Islam's does come against the guy who was pound for pound number one, Alexander Volkanovski. Alexander's two is like a weight class lighter than him. But then as far if we're looking, but that still doesn't take away from the fight. It's still great win. It's a phenomenal win. But like if you have one title defense in your division, and John Jones has 13 in his division, I feel like that's like a hard thing to like when you're stacking them up against each other. Or even if you're talking about total title defenses, I think John Jones has like 15 title defenses in total, or 16 in total. And compared to Islam's three title defenses. And then when you even look at John Jones's like list of people, that's like he has beaten 8 legends amongst that like 16 title defenses, 8 legends and 5 people in the Hall of Fame. It's crazy. And he's been in 16 title defenses, right? So where you're looking at it, whether it's like the legend in Shogun, the legend in Rampage Jackson, another legend in Machida, Hall of Famer in Shogun and Rashad Evans, Vitor Belfort, that's another legend, two Hall of Famers, Chael Sonnen and Alexander Gustafsson, uh, Glover Teixeira, who's like another future legend, DC two division Hall of Famer, Olympic wrestler, like and the list goes on of people that he has beaten, the career he's had in the same 9 years. When you take a 9 year snapshot of what Islam has done in his 9 years in the UFC compared to what John Jones has done in his 9 years in the UFC, I feel like it's drastically one sided in like who's had more of a pound for pound number one. And it's not to be disrespectful and not to say that like Islam hasn't done much. Islam is me personally, he's in the top five. He's in my top five. And I think that in itself is an impressive feat. But I think it's too early to say pound for pound number one. But like, what do you think?
Well, I would also say that if you want pound for pound status, the best way to do that is to move up, not necessarily to hold your ground against somebody from underneath you. So in the one like cross fight he's had, it was Volk twice, who was the champion at 45. And I mean, at a stretch, you could say Volk could go be a 55er. No one would ever say that Volk could go to 170, which is what Islam's asking to do.
Mm-hmm.
So it's if he were to go up to 170 and have success, to me it would almost take away some of the props that you give him for being able to beat Volkanovski, because you could say, well, part of the reason that it looked like that, especially in the second fight, is because, well, look how much bigger he is. He was able to successfully compete at 170. That proves that he has a larger frame, significantly so compared to Volkanovski. who could not realistically go up to 170 and compete. So it's that part of it is kind of missing. So even though Volk was number one at the time and he beat him, there is still a size differential that did come into that matchup and did have a close fight with him in the first fight. So it's that's a kind of like up and down way of scoring that for Islam in terms of like how much credit does he get for those two victories and like where does that put him overall in pound for pound. I agree with you. He's still top 5 right now, but it's a little bit early. And the way we started this conversation, you brought up that like the pound for pound rankings get brought up a lot now, and it's kind of like flavor of the month a little bit in terms of everybody's going, oh, this guy's moving up. Like he's got to be top 5, top 10 pound for pound when a guy's just had like 1 or 2 title defenses. But I feel like that's also the nature of like greatness discussion period right now. So like whoever's the current best like soccer player, oh, he's the GOAT, he's the greatest ever. Whoever's the current like best basketball player in the playoffs, oh my God, he's the best.
Mhm.
Like they're the best in the NBA. They're the best ever. They're like, and it's part of that argument is that like, oh, well, as we move on, the sport progresses. So whoever's the best right now, right this second, has to be the best of all time ever. And I don't necessarily subscribe to that. Uh, I You can recognize a progression in the sport without trying to say that like, oh, it only means anything like right now, because that's effectively what doing that does. It's whenever you're just crowning the newest guy the best, it's like a little bit is hyping yourself up to be like, oh, I'm so important. Look at me. I exist in the same time as the best of everybody who's ever existed. The best to ever do this is also coexisting with me, and I'm a part of it. And it also like takes away from the guys who like built the foundation that those guys now get to stand on. So like if you take those who are the stars of before and you give them all the opportunities that were created through their hard work, maybe they could even surpass like what is today. But you can't know because, we don't have like a time machine to take out, and you also wouldn't have that person's impact in the past that set the stage for now. So I think part of this conversation coming up in the moment now and how premature it is just kind of like the nature of how we all talk about sports, and like that even extends to like music and culture altogether of like, oh, this is the best thing ever right now. It's like, well, what a
Mhm.
coincidence that it's the same time you're alive and like able to interact with it, you know?
Yeah, because I feel like it's a, like you said, like recency bias.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, this is the most fire thing right now, or this fighter is the best fighter right now, or this basketball player is like just the dopest guy right now, or like this soccer player is just the guy right now, and he is the GOAT, right? Or
Mhm.
football player, running back, boxer, kickboxer, right? And I think that, and I also think it's just the nature of like our sport, our, you know what I mean? It's just like, I feel like MMA is a very what have you done for me lately
Oh
kind
yeah.
of like sport where when you are on top, oh man, people love you. They be like, oh, let you go on a win streak and like become a dominant champ. People be like, man, this guy's the truth. This lady's the truth. Like top tier, best ever. Don't chat to him or her. Like you can't stop. Like think about the run. Tony Ferguson was on. Kamaru
Mhm.
Usman was on. Is Israel Adesanya, right? All guys, all people who are on like great runs, right? And then like, or even for on the newer scale, Cyril Gahn, right? Let you lose 2 in a row, or let you have one really bad loss. Now everybody's like, I don't know if he got it anymore. Like
Yeah.
he might be washed. Like if we look at like I feel like Cyril Gahn's probably like a perfect example of this. Is like this man's been in MMA or UFC what 3 4 years. He picked up MMA like 6 years ago, I think, and then like
Mm.
he's been in the UFC I think maybe 3 4 years. If I'm not mistaken, his record is 11-2. He was steamrolling the entire heavyweight division. This man is 6'4", 6'5", 245 pounds, out here with Muhammad Ali level footwork, just styling on folks, hitting people with the master class and folks, styling on them, doing stuff that heavyweights don't normally do, like footwork, striking, impeccable, right? He became the first interim champion from France in on some Alex Pereira stuff in a very quick amount of time. When you look at Cyril Gane, Cyril Gane's outside of Tom Aspinall, outside of the current people, right? Like if you take I think this may be Stipe's last fight, and I also it sounds like it might be John's last one, depending on who it is. But if we're taking John and Stipe out of it, outside of Tom Aspinall, and that's like a 50-50, because that's the fight everyone wants to see, is Tom Aspinall versus Cyril Gane. Those two are the two best heavyweights today. And even if you put John and Stipe into the conversation again, he's still the top 5 best heavyweights today, which is crazy. But, after 2 losses, people was like, I don't know, this guy, I don't think he's going to ever be champion. He may be watched. He might be a bust. He might have been a bust. But when you look at the 2 losses he's had, the only 2 people he's lost to was John Jones, the greatest sports combat athlete of all time. The one, you could have put anybody against John Jones and they're not winning. You know what I mean? And I think part of it was, it might have been a little bit too soon, to put him in against John Jones. While I will never knock someone for chasing greatness. I think he might have got hit with a little bit of the John Jones effect. Once you're in there with the greatest sports combat athlete, and the reason I say sports combat, not even just MMA fighters, the best sports combat athlete. I think you put John Jones in any sport and he dominates. But you put him against the best boxer, I feel like he wins. Best kickboxer, he wins. Best MMA guy, he wins. But I think I don't give anyone too much flack if you lose to John Jones. You know what I mean? And then the only other loss he has is to Francis Ngannou, arguably the strongest heavyweight, strongest UFC fighter, strongest fighter in UFC fighter in the company's history. He only lost to 2 champions. And now everybody's like, man, he's watched. He just be losing every time I see. He's only lost twice in his entire career. And now everybody's like, he might have been a buzz. I was like, and then he won recently, won against the whatchamacallit, Spivak. So I think that we're in the, but even Kamaru was the only guy who you could arguably say rivals GSP's greatness at welterweight without getting laughed out of a room. If you looked at all the welterweights over the last 30 years, the only person who can kind of rival GSP's greatness, or you could say is in conversation for welterweight GOAT outside of GSP, is Kamaru Usman, right? Without people being like, oh, this guy's a joke, right? This dude's just chatting. And the run he was on was crazy. He's lost what is he on, a 2-fight losing streak? 3, right? Because it was 2 to Leon, 1 to Khamzat.
Yeah, and then yep.
But then those 2 people, you're talking about the guy who's the current welterweight champion and the guy who everyone's considering the next best thing. He didn't lose to 2 slouches. You know what I mean? He lost to 2 of the top tier competition.
The Khamzat one wasn't at the weight class that he was a champion at. So
yeah, it was at middleweight, I think, right?
Yeah, that one was moving up to middleweight and was against a guy who's a lot larger than he is. So it's at a different point in his career. It's people are already saying that, and I think Usman would agree that he's on at least the latter half of his career at this point. He's just shifting out of his prime, and he's fighting a guy who's supposed to be this up and comer who's either already in his prime or is entering his prime right now. And then the other one is the first Leon fight. He was winning the entire time. It was a complete everybody called it a fluke, including everybody who bets, because when they rematched it, Kamaru went off as the favorite. So people were still saying that, okay, yes, it was a cool moment, but that was a total fluke. And if you run it back again, it'll look like the first 4 rounds. It didn't end up happening that way. It looks
Mhm.
like it's either there was an adjustment made and Leon was able to implement his game plan better, or maybe it was just the confidence of the first win that gave it to him. But like you're really talking about one real like performance that you wouldn't say was good. It's he went up and everybody said that he arguably won the fight against Hamza, like, or that it was a close fight and he fought well. So like we're talking about one bad performance in the rematch with Leon, and people say, "Oh, you're washed." Like time to get you like out to pasture, bro. Like let's get you fighting like some 40-year-olds and some other guys like that. And it's like it feels like this whole cycle, less so with Kamaru because he had to earn respect a lot slower than some of the other guys, but like
Yeah.
with Gon and some of the other guys that get to sort of stardom and kind of fanfare sooner, it's this big build up, kind of like people used to do back in the day with like pop stars, back when everybody kind of listened to the same sort of music, where
Mhm.
it's like on the way up you can do no wrong. It's like you're the golden child that's going to deliver all success for everybody and everybody loves you. And then the second that something like goes wrong and you got to like this fever pitch point, then it's like, okay, cool. Now we're going to tear you down for more fun. Like we built you up for fun and now we're tearing you down for fun.
Yeah, it's like when you go from being the hunter to being the hunted.
Yeah.
Like when you go from being the hunter to being the hunted. When you're the hunter, oh man, everybody's like, "Hey man, we're rooting for you. Hey, keep going, keep going." Like you said, everyone's rooting for it. Like Sear on his like initial like run, or like you think about any of the stars from the beginning, right? Like any of the current stars, you think about like the Sean O'Malley's, the Cyril Guns, the Israel Adesanyas. You know what I mean? Like anyone like who was like the, I guess, the, like for lack of better words, like you're saying, like the golden child. Oh man, we are the come on, people be like, "Hey man, this guy's the truth. Hey, this guy's it. He's him." Like all blah 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 blah. And then once you become champion, or once you become, yeah, like once you've ascended to like the top, then when you're the hunted, then people are not like, I mean, there's still people cheering for you and cheering for you to succeed. I'm a fan of all these fighters, right? Like, but then you definitely start seeing people being like, "Oh, Sean O'Malley got Dana White privilege. Oh, Saragon's like washed. Oh, Izzy's it might be time for him to retire." But really, but like all these things were the exact same things people were cheering for in the very beginning. You know what I mean? Like
Mm.
like Izzy's charisma, Sean O'Malley's charisma, Cyril Gane's charisma. You know what I mean? Like they had the charisma and they could fight. So the thing that people were cheering for in the beginning kind of becomes the thing. Like as soon as they have like a bad performance, like you know what I mean? But then also vice versa, it also works like I know we were talking about the downside of it, but also it works the other way too. Like think about the beginning of Charles Oliveira's career.
Mm.
He wasn't like the legendary mythical fighter that he is today. He was like a pretty if I'm not mistaken, a 500 fighter where people were just like, like take it or leave it. They weren't too crazy about it. Yo, he dyed the hair blonde, turned into Super Saiyan Oliveira, starts stringing some wins together. Now everybody's like, "Ah man, I've been with Oliveira since the beginning. This guy is like, he's legendary. Look at all the numbers of finishes. Look at this. Look at that. Look at this. This guy's true." But when you hear Oliveira, like, I mean, still the same guy.
Mm.
But I feel like that's the really fascinating part of the sport is if you're on the downturn, like if you're on a down spiral, right? Like even if you're in the like a low point in your career and you're thinking like, man, everybody's just like giving me a proper kick in the butt. You know what I mean? all you need is a really good win. All you need is like one or two uh like really kind of like standout performances, let you get two knockouts in a row. Oh, everyone's gonna you gonna go from the bottom to the top. People are gonna forget about, like, again, the recency bias. People are gonna forget about those two losses. They'd be like, man, I don't know, this guy may be it. He may be it. So really, I think that also on the vice versa, like you lose one really badly, they might be like, ah. But I think that's just the nature of the sport. Is just like, uh, if you're at the bottom, there's two ways to look at it. You can look at it as, dang man, these fans are fickle, man. All the time I put it into the sport, or you could be like, hey, I may be on a downturn right now, but also let me get one or two wins and I'm back in business. You know what I mean? Like I'm back at the like vying for a title opportunity. If you get string 2, 3 in a row, conversation is like completely different.
Well, I think that's also why you notice that the guys who have like an enduring success in the UFC and in MMA in general, they're not super reliant on what the fans think because
Mm-hmm.
like there could just be like as much as it'd be nice to say like when people are like riding you like oh man just like one or two performances and this will all turn around. It's to be like a fighting because it's like a one-on-one sport because it's also such an extreme example of a one-on-one sport. It's so personal to
Mm-hmm.
you, like your performance and who you are and how you're viewed. And a lot of fighters, especially you see like looking into retirement, like tie their identity to who they are as a fighter. So like trying to separate out how personal it is to you, like your career and fighting and how you're perceived, like that's such a like you have to be such a zen like Buddhist monk kind of character in order to separate that out and be like, okay, they're just booing like their perception of me and like a mask rather than me personally and what I did and what I'm capable of. And like having an arena full of people feel like they're booing directly at you when you're sharing like your art and your performance. That's got to be like such a minefield to navigate like mentally and try and like get out of that. So anytime that you're like putting your like mental health and like where you are with your standing in the fans, I feel like that's a recipe.
Hey, you're frozen.
Okay, I'm back.
Okay.
I don't know what trigger phrase I said, but my internet was not having it.
Second.
I don't know what trigger phrase I said, but my internet was not having it.
Your Wi-Fi was like, I've had enough of this.
Yeah.
It was just like you talking about oh, but you were talking about the wins, like not getting too connected to the wins
Oh,
and
yes.
losses.
Yes, I was communicating a
Mhm.
positive mental health message, and my internet was not allowing it. So,
It was like, what positivity? No.
yeah. So it basically the point was just like if you involve yourself too much in like oh that's what I was saying. Yeah. So if you allow like the opinions of the fans and like other people to build you up and like that could snowball you really quickly in the beginning of your career to like have an untouchable aura about you and confidence because everybody's with you in that moment and like they're chanting your name and so you just feel like you can walk through the raindrops and everything you do is going to work out. So that confidence can propel you in the beginning, but if you still have that mentality, eventually when the first sort of like speed bump hits, it's going to bury you. And I feel like maybe a good example of that would be Paulo Costa because he was a guy who was on this big run. Everybody was behind him as this like Terminator figure
Brazilian
who
Goku.
yeah,
Hmm.
this guy looks like he's straight out of a superhero movie and he's coming to wreck house and he's going to be the champion and there's nothing you can do. And then he like self-sabotages when he gets to the pinnacle and his title shot. It ends in an embarrassing defeat and then it feels like he gets knocked off the ladder and has to build himself up back from scratch to the point where I mean that was years ago he had that title shot and he's still recovering from it now where he's saying like I turned away like after his last loss to Sean Strickland, he went back and watched the video and says like, I don't recognize myself. This isn't what I'm about. This isn't like the fighting style that brought me all my success. And I'm gonna go back to that now. But like we're years now since that title shot that kind of knocked him off course. So I think it's possible that as well as just like that moment and that occasion getting to him, perhaps he wrapped himself up too much in the fans and like what the perception of him was, and that kind of led the snowball up. But then once it got to the top of the mountain, it started rolling downhill, and he just couldn't stop the momentum.
Yeah, because I would agree with that. Where it's like not, I think to have like just my opinion, our opinion, right? Like like to have the ones you do see have that long term kind of like success in the UFC, and my opinion as well is that the people who, yeah, like they don't allow themselves to get too connected to that, like the wins and losses, the fans, what the fans think, right? Like you want like that the energy from the fans to, like, that, when you're walking out and you get that pop from the crowd, and when you're over with the fans, like that is a great feeling, and you're like, oh man, this is amazing. But yeah, not letting yourself be swayed one way or another, right? Like not let it, like, because I think that's a dangerous way to like run your career, like you were saying, is like if allow yourself to be like swept away with the praise, you're gonna be like, oh yeah, you've had that in early in your career, that can give you that sense of invincibility, that, or like you're like, oh man, I'm walking through the rain in the sunshine, I'm sunshine wherever I go, because I feel like everyone loves to love a champion, you know what I mean?
Mm,
um but at the same time, nobody loves to love a can kicker, you know what I mean? Nobody loves
yeah.
a can, like, you know what I mean, as far as fans go, right?
Mm,
But if your whole identity is wrapped up in like what the fans think, oh, that's a very volatile way to like live your life slash career. Like what the
mm,
fans think, what people, social media thinks, what everybody else thinks. You know what I mean? if you run your whole life like that, that's a very volatile way of like living your life, running your career. Because one day everyone can love you, and then the next day everyone could hate you, or people don't like rock with you. And if your whole identity is wrapped up in like, oh man, they really rock with me, they really do, they really love me, and then the next day they're just like, maybe they're off to the next person, or they just be like, oh, you have a bad performance, might just be like, I don't know, this guy ain't looking like he used to. Maybe time for retirement. You might be like, it's time for me to go. Like, what happened? You know what I mean? Like, I think
Mm.
that's a stressful way to live and stressful way to go. I think that, who I think does a really good job of staying fairly, not getting too high off the highs of the fan love, but also not getting too low off the lows.
Hmm.
The anomaly Yuri Prohaska, the samurai himself, at least just from outside perspective, it
Hmm.
doesn't look like Yuri a lot like lets himself get too high off of the fan praise, but also doesn't let himself get too low off the fan like criticism either. Like when the fans cheer
Hmm.
for him, it looks like he takes it in and he enjoys it and he's like, yeah, like uses that to propel him to the next level. But all fans give him criticism, like when against like Pereira, when he fought
Hmm.
Pereira, and then like that was like, and then like he went down and like I think those two leg kicks immobilized me. He went down and people was like, boo. He wasn't like, you know what? Flip the table. I'm done. I'm out of here.
Hmm.
I'm retiring. He was just kind of like, hey, this too shall pass. Just like the love will come and go. The like just like the like all the love will come and go. Also, all the criticism will come and go. It could affect him. We don't know, but at least from the outside looking in, he looks like someone who's not too phased. Also, Alex Pereira. Both of
Yeah.
them look like feel like people who don't let themselves get too phased by like the love or the hate. Like,
I'll tell you
they
another one
enjoy
that
the
like
love and they be
people wouldn't think about is Max Holloway. Like, how many
yeah,
people after the like third or fourth uh Volkanovski loss were like, all right, that's it. Like Max Holloway's going to be like a gatekeeper or something like that for the rest of his career, and then he'll retire. And clearly, like to him, he's like, I don't care nothing about what you guys think. Like I'm going to write my own story here. And like now he's the BMF, and everybody's back on the wagon again. Like Max needs to
exactly.
fight for the belt right now, whereas like nobody was asking for that for like years.
Yeah. And just to show you how the sport goes, it goes in cycles. One day they love you, and next day they don't. All you got to do is keep stay on your bicycle and keep or stay on your on your path and just kind of keep focusing forward. Stay on your path and just kind of like block out the outside. Because yeah, like you said, the with Max Holloway after that, like the third, fourth Volkanovski one, like, oh man, he's gonna be a gatekeeper. Maybe he should retire. But it was so crazy when I was hearing that because just because not Volk, Max Holloway's been doing this for so long, he's only like 30 or 31. He just started this when he was really young. I think he's may have started this like at 21, 20, something like that. And now it just feels like he's been around forever, but he's still like in the prime of his career. And so when people were saying that, I was like, yo, that's crazy. Like he's very young. And then when I looked up, I was like, man, he's been in here for a while. And I looked at their age and I was like, man, this dude's super young. And like you said, again, the cycles. All you need is just like how if you have one bad performance, the fans can leave you. You have a great performance, the fans are there again. The UFC 300 was the perfect example of that. Max Holloway lands that crazy punch and puts out Justin Gaethje. The internet went crazy. The fans went crazy. That I saw that clip probably 100 times in 100 different ways for like a week or two after that fight. There was like him edited with the Goku hair, the Super Saiyan hair. Another one was like with the WWE sounds in the background, like oh no, oh no, no, no. Like it's but yeah, like Max Holloway doesn't allow I feel like yeah, he's another one who doesn't allow himself to get like too swayed by the cheers or the boos. You know what I mean? I feel like he's like his main thing is like, okay, what do my friends and family think? What my team thinks? Okay, they still rock with me? Cool. That's all that matters. The fans will come when they come, or they'll leave when they leave. But like at the end of the day, he's still him.
Yeah, and
He's still rocking.
I mean,
The
we could name examples all day, but just
Yeah, that's true.
one last one that like is pretty high profile, I would say, is Dustin Poirier. Like,
Yeah.
especially you know, after the series of Connor fights, like how many people were way out of pocket the things that they were saying to him about like his
Super
family
out of
and his
pocket.
wife, and like out in
Super
public,
out of
like
pocket.
in his face and stuff like that. And
Yeah.
it's a lot of people were saying a lot of really disrespectful things about Dustin Poirier and his family. And how much did he just go like put that away? Like the only thing that matters is like what's right here and me and like my hometown and my training partners and
Hmm.
like the family I have around me. Like that's it. Everybody else, like if we're on the up and you want a fist pound, like I'll give you a fist pound, but like keep your distance because like I know what some of you are.
Yeah, he's like, hey, we can fist pound if you want to be. If you, it really feels like he's on some like, if you want to be on Team Dustin, Team Poirier, hey, we're here for the vibes. But if you don't want to be on Team Poirier, hey, that's fine too. If you want to fist pound, we can fist pound. But also, if you're trying to hate, like, stay away, you know?
Yeah.
Because yeah, some people were, yeah, super out of pocket with some of the stuff they were saying, even during the Benoit Saint Denis fight,
Hmm.
like. People was like 8 ball corner pocket out of pocket. You know what I mean? You know when you hit that 8 ball that bounce off the corner and doesn't go in, and now you're just going all across the pool table, like just talking reckless. And they were like, and Dustin kind of blocked out the noise, got the win against Connor. The BSD, hey, we are both fans of both Dustin and BSD Benoit Saint Denis. I was watching that fight like, oh man, this is gonna be a crazy fight. And then, the things people were saying, thinking like he was done, they were like, oh man, they're feeding Poirier to Benoit Saint Denis to like get him to fight his own next. They're giving him the push. He's getting the rub. And like people was talking about it like, oh, this he was just gonna be like a tomato can like for Benoit Saint Denis, or like he was just supposed to be the stepping stone for BSD's like climb to the title. And I was thinking like, yo, that's kind of one out of pocket to say to a dude who's gonna be a future Hall of Famer, to a legend, you know what I mean? Super out of pocket. And then also like I feel like a lot of people was calling it too soon. Like y'all like looking way past the fight that hasn't even happened yet. And what happened? Dustin didn't let that stuff get to him. He said he boom, and when he won, the same people who are like, ah man, he's getting fed to BSD. They were like, oh, Dustin's back. But also at the same time, while there are a lot of like fair weather, like fans who are like, for lack of better words, like fair weather, like they kind of change, their what have even though it is kind of like what have you done for me lately? I do think that there are like for certain fighters they have like that core fan base. You know what I mean? Those fans that have like been through there with thick and thin, like who have been like with me and Alexa Grasso. I've been a fan of Alexa Grasso since 2016, since the Marcos fight. I've told everybody and anybody who would listen that she was going to be a champion someday. I've been probably one of the few people who've been beating the Alexa Grasso drum, the Alexa for champion, for what, 8 years now, 6, 7 years. And even when she got her chance against Valentina, and everybody was like, "Oh, Valentina's gonna win," they was like, "Oh man, you're crazy. You think Alexa's gonna win?" I was like, Alexa Grasso by finish. She's gonna beat Valentina. Even though I'm a fan of Valentina, she's a legendary fighter. I think she's definitely gonna be in the Hall of Fame. Amazing fighter. But by being such a big fan of Alexa Grasso, I was like, she's gonna win by finish. I have that gut feel, but also your boy don't miss most times. I feel like I have a pretty good record of choosing people who are gonna be like picking out like the diamonds in the rough, picking the people who are gonna picking future champions. Like when they're on the early prelims and being like, oh, that person's got it. But yeah, I think I was the only person outside of Team Lobo and her family and Alexa Grasso's family who said Alexa Grasso is gonna finish Valentina. But there's or like me with uh
Juliana
Leota
Pena.
Machida,
Juliana Pena.
Juliana Pena, another one. I've been rocking with her since The Ultimate Fighter and said, hey, she's gonna be a champion through the ups and the downs. I was like, hey, I was probably the only person, probably one of the very few people who said Juliana Pena was gonna get the finish, was gonna finish Amanda Nunes. And I was like, second round, third round, she's gonna get the finish against Amanda Nunes. And people thought I was insane. And then once Juliana got the finish, I believe it was second round. Oh man, the feeling of I don't know if vindication is the right word, but I was just like, oh man, so I told all of you, you didn't believe Mystic Malik is on the case. It was a great feeling, but it's also a really nice feeling when you're like, when you can get behind a fighter who is like, who's on the come up and get to see their progression to the top through the ups and the downs, and you get to be able to be like, when they become champion, oh, it's a great feeling because it's the storyline. You've been there since the beginning. You've seen the ups, you've seen the downs. You've been able to be like, oh man, this, whether it was like Leota Machida, um, Tatsuro Taira right now, Connor when he was on the uprise before, like Connor before the Jose Aldo fight, you know what I mean? Trying to think of other people that I like called from the beginning: Alexa Grasso, Juliana Pena, Connor, Leota Machida. I think right now that's going to be the same for Lupe Godinez, Tatsuro Taira. You know what I mean? Uh, I said Leon Edwards was going to beat Kamaru by finish, and I thought I was going to have to eat my words for a second. Leon had me nervous because I was telling everybody, "Yo, Leon's gonna finish. Kamaru's great, but Leon's gonna get the finish." I feel the underdog Cinderella story coming on, and it was getting very dangerously close to being like, I was like, I might have gotten this one wrong. I might have to eat my words. And then he came back with the kick. I said, oh, we're back. We're back, Mortimer. But I would consider myself a big fan of Cyril. I've been on the Cyril Gone train for a minute. Even through the losses, I feel like he's gonna be a champion. But yeah, I think you do have certain fighters have that hardcore fan base that where you're like through the wins and losses, like you're gonna like still rock with them. And so I think that yes, you don't want to attach yourself to the wins and losses, or like attach yourself to the fans. I guess the fans' perception of you, whether they like rock with you or don't. But I think that yeah, whether it's your friends, your family, maybe those. I think it's one of those things where why worry about the people who don't rock with you when you have so many people that do. You know what I mean? Even if it's just one person, 5 people, 7 people, why worry about all of the people who are either like just downing on you, hating on you, whatever it is, or the people who are spreading negativity when you got these people who are giving you, who are rocking with you, you know? I think that's because I think that one just easy. See, it's an easier way because I think that like the people who are gonna come and go, people want to rock with you, people don't want to rock with you. But I think when you focus on that and you focus on the people who do matter, and you just continue on your path, those people are either gonna fall off. The people who didn't rock with you, they're gonna either like get bored or get tired and then go find another person to hate on. Because once you continue on your path, they're gonna be like, oh well, this isn't fun. They're not giving me any attention. They're not giving me the feedback that I need. You know what I mean? Or they're just gonna like you may turn some haters into believers. You know, it's just like, but if you like, I think when you focus on your path and you just stay on your path and you worry about the things that do matter and don't stress yourself about the things you can't control, I think that kind of leads to long-term success rather than just kind of like having the vision, seeing it from a macro perspective rather than the micro. Because I think, yeah, when you're into the every day to day, what are people saying? What are people this? Because people change their opinions like they change stocks. You know, it's just like it's not. I feel like I don't put. I wouldn't put. I don't. Me personally, don't put too much stock in it. But the before I for, before I forget, because we kind of went on a bit of a tangent, but the so what we're gonna give. I want to hear your pound for pound because everyone's list is different. I want to hear your pound for pound, right? So I think that before we give our pound for pound list, let's set out the criteria. How the criteria of what, who makes, what is the minimum, what's the criteria to make the pound for pound list? I personally think, you let me know if you have any different thoughts. I think that you have to have, you have to be a current champion because me personally, I feel like, hey, if you're a champion, it means you're the best in your division right now. So I think that if you're a current champion, I think you are in the conversation of pound for pound. And then you must like have had a fight in the last 2 years, two to 3 years. Because you know, there could be injuries that sideline people and whatnot. But I think have you must have had a fight, at least for me, I feel like but to like make sure we have like a unified rule set of our criteria is unified. I think you need to be the champion of your weight division, and at least whether it's interim or current belt holder, and you must have had a fight in the last 2 to 3 years. What do you think? All right, is there
The
anything you would
only
add to that,
I
or
would just
anything?
say, in my opinion, you don't have to be the current active champion. You just have
Mhm,
to have like been champion at some point because like I think that if like let's say the champion of your division is the number one pound for pound and you just can't get past him. To me, you could still be like a top 5, top 10 guy.
mhm.
It's just maybe that guy in particular is either a bad matchup for you or like he's just the best and you can't really get around it. But you're close, but like you just can't.
Okay, I could see that. I okay.
Kind of like when Izzy first took over the middleweight division and
Mhm.
Robert Whitaker was like in really good form
Yeah,
still. And
yeah.
to me was like one of the best pound for pound fighters still like,
Mhm,
but
mhm, mhm.
it's sort of at the time he just couldn't beat Izzy, and then like he showed in the rematch that like he was that close, he was that good. It's just it lacked like the last little bit to get over the edge.
Like style, yeah, like they say, styles make fights, and sometimes it's just a bad style matchup, like Max Holloway versus Volk.
Mm,
Just wasn't a good matchup, but still, Max Holloway dusts every person that's not named Alexander Volkanovski or like Izzy and like you said, Izzy and Robert Whitaker. Robert Whitaker beats anybody who's not named Israel Adesanya.
yeah.
Okay, if we're doing it like that, because I will sit and say that, but we could put that in there. If we do choose that, add that to the criteria, that does shift my rankings some.
Mm.
So I will let you go first while I readjust my rankings, because now if it's just you got to be champion at some point, that
Mhm.
does add some people into mine, because I made mine's off of like people who are the current champions. So now that if we can add people who at least they had to be champion at some point, that does add certain people I want to like add on, or it does cause me to shift my rankings some. So go ahead, I'll let you go first.
Okay, so for me, number one, currently, I would still go John Jones. To me, the pound for pound sort of list is meant to recognize who you think is the most like skilled and would win fights based on if everybody was the same size. So I think if you even it out and you made everybody the same size, I still think John Jones would come out number one regardless. It's I think when you look at not just in kind of a similar fashion to the way Robert Whitaker was champion of his division, like it isn't necessarily one standout skill, but it's the way that he's well rounded and the way that he puts the skills together, the way that he mixes the arts together to transition easily between grappling and striking and clinching and all of the different positions and being able to recognize like, okay, where can I best gain an advantage in this fight and being balanced enough to take advantage there. So to me, he's number one.
Okay, and then just
Do
go
you want me to
through
go?
your whole list. Yeah,
Okay, the whole thing. Okay,
yeah.
so John Jones number one. Number two. This is a little bit controversial because I'm going. This is my opinion. This is my
Hmm.
list. So
Hmm.
number
Hey, yeah,
two,
it's your list.
I'm putting Alexander Volkanovski. So I
I don't
know
think that's super controversial though.
I think some people, depending on how you interpret his last couple of fights, might might be like pushing him further down than I would. But to me, when I look at it, everything that he did at featherweight, combined with how good his performance was against a larger guy in his fight first time. And to me, I know people will point out his last two, but I think that he's kind of a victim of his own A, success, and B, mentality in his last two fights, in terms of nobody who's playing the game smartly would recommend that he take those last two fights when he took them. So I think that he didn't give a good showing of himself in his last two fights against Taporia and Islam, the one that he lost by KO, in a large part because he has such a willingness and like a drive to continue to get back in there as soon as possible. And he said before that like he feels he's at his best when he's in camp preparing for a fight, and it helps him stay focused and kind of be the guy that he wants to be, which I think he really needs to work on that because eventually this will come to an end and like you're going to need to figure out how to cope without it. But I think that that was these last two fights are the first time that that mentality has hurt him. To me, it has only built him up to that point in terms of his willingness to turn it around as soon as possible and get right back in there and show dominance and all of his skills as a champion when he was at 145 and in his first matchup with Islam. So for that, I have him number two. Number three, it's I'll go Alex Pereira. So guy who came into the UFC, got elevated and pushed right up to the title shot, wins against Izzy TKO, has a setback where he loses the rematch by KO, and then takes that and goes up to a weight class where the weight jump is not 10 pounds; it's a significant jump in weight. Goes up there seamlessly, and in as much as we could all like say he hasn't been tested in certain parts of his game, the ability to translate his striking up another weight class that's not just 10 pounds, to me is a lot. And also, again, much like Volk, the willingness to step in on short notice over and over again elevates him in my mind in terms of he's not he's not giving necessarily what you would say is his best every single time, because like ideal circumstances would never be to fight as often as he does. Like that just wouldn't be optimal, and you could tell like in some of these fights he is going in there injured, and he takes the fight when he knows he's injured. It's not just something that happens in camp the way that like kind of the normal procedure would be. It's he's completely fine with accepting this risk, showing up in big events on short notice against the toughest guy that they can book him against, and he always just says yes. So like his willingness to get down and the way that he always goes just right through the obstacles. Like every time that they stack it up and you think like, oh man, this is like a lot to ask on short notice, and he's got all this pressure on him. He just goes right through it. Like as much as you could say the fights that he's had oblige him, giving him the opportunity to win in his style, and he doesn't have to defend takedowns all that much. It's I can't grade you on what didn't happen. You know, it's I can't knock you for something I didn't see. So it's to me, you still get credit for the moving up and your willingness to get down, and the amount of times that you've saved events for the UFC makes you, to me, boost you and elevate you in the pound for pound. So I got him number 3. Number 4. Okay, so number 4, I'm gonna go with Max Holloway. It's just beat Justin Gaethje at 55. Before Volk turned up, was the guy at 45 who everybody thought would be the featherweight GOAT. Like you said, he's been in the UFC forever. It's had some amazing performances. Uh, really, it's only been Volkanovski and the one Poirier fight that's given him any sort of trouble. And the Volkanovski fights, the reason we got so many of them, even though he was on the losing side, was they were so close. So to me, being that close to that guy, having your own accomplishments at 55, that's good enough for 4. And then number 5, it's close, but I have Islam at number 5. So there's some other champions that I think are good, but I think the skill set Islam has and the way that he imposes it, to me, I don't know if I'll ever have him number 1 because he doesn't have the dominance of like a Khabib does. Like the reason it was so easy to put Khabib up at number 1 and in the argument with John was the fashion in which he won in the fights was so dominant that it just made you say, well, what am I supposed to do? Like this was a guy who I rated really highly and he just stormed him. So like what how am I supposed to say you're not this ever great thing when the guys who I thought could give you a challenge aren't really able to offer any resistance to you? So it's Islam doesn't really do it in that manner necessarily. I think he did it against Charles in that manner, and you could say like that looked dominant, that looked like Khabib-esque. But a lot of the other ones, it does that, even though he is more well-rounded. But I think the names he's fought are very impressive. The style in which he's done it in most of the fights has been good. So I would say he's number 5 for me right now. How about you?
That's a very solid list. Solid list. I like it. I like it. Because the whole time because I do agree with like the points you brought up, with most of the points you brought up. And most of because on my end, now that we're choosing people who just, the bar to entry was you just need to be active and you were a champion at some point. It shifted some people up and down the list for me. Majority of mines are like people who are current champions who have like proven themselves, right? And I have who are a champion of some sort, right? Because I feel like as long as you have a belt, I'm considering it, right? Uh, one of them may be controversial. One or two of them may be controversial, and then someone who was my number 5 got bumped down to number 6 just because of like the addition of the rule of, hey, you just needed to be champion at some point. So apologies to number 5, but you got edged out just a little bit by a little, and you got moved down to number 6 because of the addition of the new rule. But again, all of them are pretty good. So number 1 for me, I also have John Jones as the pound for pound number 1 because, again, if we're talking about pound for pound number 1, if we're talking about making everyone the equal size, it's you'd be hard pressed to just not say John Jones wins in that kind of scenario. You take John Jones against every single champion in the UFC today, whether it be there's only maybe out of every single champion, there's only one maybe. Like you take Alex Pereira, you take Dricus du Plessis, you take Leon Edwards, you take Pantoja, you take Ilya Taporia, Sean O'Malley. You know what I mean? You take all these guys, right? I don't think I'm missing. Am I missing anybody on the guy side? I think I got everyone, right? I think so.
I think you did.
Pantoja, O'Malley, Taporia, Dricus du Plessis, Leon Edwards, Pereira. Okay, yeah. The only maybe in that scenario is Alex Pereira. But still, that's like a 60-40 John. You know what I mean? Like, even that one is not even like a definite, like, it's still like leaning more towards John. But it's also, when you look at the stats and you just look at the numbers they put up, John Jones is number 1 by a country mile. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like also if you were to put any 2 fighters on the roster today in a room with John Jones and you lock the door and say one of y'all got to come out, John Jones is probably coming out 99 times out of 10, 99% of the time. You know what I mean? Like, even if you lock the cage and say, hey, you put your best skills against their best skills, John Jones is coming out. 16 title fights. Again, 16 title fights, like 14 defenses, 15 defenses, whatever that crazy number may be, right? The number of Hall of Famers he's beaten, the number of legends he's beaten, in the fashion he's done it. Youngest UFC champion ever. He's right now, the only fighter who's beaten the superstars before him, the superstars of the previous era, the superstars of his era, and has gone on to beat the superstars of the next era. You know what I mean? Like my bad, rewording. Beat the superstars of the previous generation, then beat the superstars of his generation, and then went on to beat the superstars of the next generation. Who's doing that? No one. No one has done it. No one. That's the answer. So, and then not to bring up the old stuff, but like he did half of that sloshed, like hammered. You know what I mean? So like we saw what a sober John Jones can do against Cyril Gane, who's my favorite heavyweight right now. That man went in there and said, "Yeet," and it was over with. You know what I mean? So I think that just the list of accolades: youngest champion ever, 16 title fights, 15 title defenses. Come on, like what are we talking about here? That's crazy for there to be 7 billion people on the earth. That must be a crazy feeling to be there for there to be 7 billion people on earth, and for John Jones to know there's not a human walking today that could beat him. That must be an amazing feeling to know. Out of all the people on earth, ain't a person walking today who could beat him. So, and then also he's on the Mount Rushmore of MMA. That's what pound for pound number 1 means. You are on the Mount Rushmore, or you have a spot on Mount Rushmore, and you can like stand on 10 toes. You can confidently stand on 10 toes down and say, hey, I'm on Mount Rushmore for X, Y, and Z reasons. Which I think like most people can't do. Because you're standing with the George St. Pierre's, the Anderson Silvas, the legends, right? Number 2, on my pound for pound list. Alex Poatan Pereira. Just the amount of things he's done in the short amount of time he's done it. I know some people say he was fast tracked because to fight Izzy, and yes, that is true. But he still fought like 3 or 4 people before he got to Izzy and steamrolled like most of them, knocked out most of them, steamrolled all of them, but knocked out everyone except for one. And then on top of that, in like the 3-4 years he's been in the UFC, he's fought in almost nothing but former champions. He's fought in 5 former champions and has knocked out all of them except for one. That is insane. He knocked out Izzy. He knocked out Strickland. He knocked out Pereira. And let's restart this right now. Knocked out Izzy, who's the former middleweight champion, former long-reigning middleweight champion. Knocked out Sean Strickland, former middleweight champion. Knocked out Yuri Prohaska, former light heavyweight champion, and then went on to knock out Jamal Hill, former light heavyweight champion. So he's knocked out 2 champions in 2 different divisions. That is insane. And then fought Jan Blachowicz to a decision. So that means not only were you knocking out champions in your division and you just got here, you went up a weight class and then beat 3 more former champions in that division, which is unbelievable. And he is potentially 1 title shot away from being on Mount Rushmore, because he's 1 title shot away from being the first ever fighter to win a belt in 3 different divisions. You know what I mean? Like literally, if he goes up and fights John Jones at heavyweight and wins, which is a possibility, I don't see how you don't go on Mount Rushmore when you are the first ever triple champ. You know what I mean? Like,
and at huge weight disparities. Like,
yes,
you couldn't get a bigger weight disparity for a trio of weight classes than that.
Yeah, exactly. You went from 185 to 205 pounds. You became a champion at 185. Then said, you know what? Let's turn up the difficulty. To if you play Madden and you're on let's turn this to what is it, all pro, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's like rookie and then all pro. You're like, oh, let's go to all pro. Go up a weight class and be like, let's go all Madden. To go from 185 from middleweight at 185 to jump all the way up to 205 at light heavyweight, and then to potentially go from 205 to 265 or 250, because most of the heavyweights are somewhere between 240 and 260 ish, right? I think the heaviest is like 265. I think that's the weight limit. But those 3 are such crazy weight jumps. But then also to do that in the fashion that he's done it in, he's shown up and just knocked out everybody. He's got that one leg. I think I finally figured out the leg kick and why it's so such an insane. It's an unorthodox way to kick, but that's another time for another show. I figured out. I think I figured out why his Alex Pereira's leg kick is so effective, and it's so unorthodox. But he's got 1 punch knockout power. He's got 1 kick knockout. Like, he immobilized former light heavyweight champion Yuri Prochazka with 2 kicks, which is crazy. Who do you know? Because normally leg kicks are a war of attrition. Second, third round, that start working. He said, bet, hold my beer, and then said, I'll make these leg kicks work this round 1. Give me 2 leg kicks. And then he has that knockout power, but also he has the charisma. He's probably one of the most over fighters with the fans, right? And for people who don't know, people who are over with the fans, I mean, just the fans, he has a positive fan reception. Like, the fans really rock with him. But he's gotten over with the fans very quickly, given that he speaks no English. Normally a lot of fighters come and they'll try to learn English to get over with the fans and to build that rapport. both him and Charles Oliveira be pulling up just like you could just feel the aura, feel that charisma when they talk and when they're speaking Portuguese, and you just be like, whatever he said, that I whatever he said that I agree 100%. The charisma, and then he's got his own catchphrase now. He'd be like Jama. You know how that is probably one of the most like over catchphrases with the UFC. It's like headshot bang.
Hmm.
How just once Leon starts saying headshot bang, everybody starts saying it. You got all these people being like Jama. You know what I mean? Which is dope.
I mean, even other fighters are like marking his gimmick. Like everybody
Yeah.
at UFC 300 was also like walking up to him and saying it back to him.
Yeah.
Even he was like, "Oh, okay, like, yeah, that's the."
Right? Like, you know how influential of a fighter you got to be for you to say it, right? For that to be your catchphrase, for other fighters, for your peers to come up to you randomly backstage and being like, "Hey, Java, see, I did the thing. I did the thing. That's your thing. Now we got a, like now we have a thing. You know what I mean? Like, I did the thing. That's your thing, and now we're having a moment because I said Java, you said Java. Hey, we're cool. We're friends. You know what I mean? Like, how often do you see people do that? Not very often.
Yeah.
Sean Strickland has a phrase. No one ever is like coming up to Sean like, as much as as friend like fan like as much as the fans love Sean Strickland. No one's coming up saying Sean Strickland's catchphrase. Um, a lot of fighters have had catchphrases, and no one's really going up to them backstage being like, "Hey, this." Sean Strickland has no. Alex Pereira has the best fighters in the world. Some of the most accomplished martial artists in the world coming up to him being like, "Hey," having like a fan moment, being like, "Yo," maybe he'd be like, "Jama," and then people be like, "Hey, what does Jama mean? I want to be in. I want to be a part of the cool kids." Let me know what that means. Like even before at UFC 300, before Jamal Hill and Alex fought, Jamal was like, "Hey, what's that mean? I want to know. I want to know. Tell me." And he was just like, "Oh, the translate me just it just means like let's go." And he's like, okay, cool. Charles, hey, man, I'm part of the cool kids. Hey, you know what I mean? Like, I feel like it's just a really cool energy good energy he brings. He's very over with the fighters and the fans, which is I feel like not that common. Number 3, again, maybe a little bit controversial, but I say Leon Edwards. I put Leon Edwards at my like top 3, and let me explain why. Current welterweight champion. So that means he's the best welterweight in his division today. And I would say he's proven so. He's starting to prove so, right? Because he beat Kamaru Usman, who is the guy only guy outside of in the last 30 years who's the closest person saying that they are in the conversation for welterweight go outside of GSP. He was getting this work for a solid 24 minutes and 55 seconds or 5. But then he showed that championship mentality, that championship mentality, the championship fighter, and pulled it out of the fire with the head kick heard across the world and the headshot bang. And then also in the rematch, proved that like, hey, it wasn't a fluke, and put it on and like beat the best wrestler in that division, right? Best fighter in that division, right? And then went on to he's a striker, beating the best wrestler, probably one of the best wrestlers, if not the best wrestler in the entire organization, being a striker. And then to go on and not only win once, win twice, then move on to the second best wrestler in the division, possibly the organization. I don't even like Colby Covington, but Colby Covington's skills are valid. and Leon Edwards walked straight through Colby Covington. He made Colby Covington look like whatchamacallit. You know how when fighters be acting when they fight like John Jones or Amanda Nunes, they be falling, they be getting hit with the John Jones effect. Like it just be they be like that I don't know if you've ever seen. Do you watch? Have you ever seen Hunter x Hunter? Or you ever seen One Piece?
I've seen some One Piece.
You know how they have that like conquerors hockey, and then people be like, oh man, like they be like frozen with fear almost, or like they
Mm.
just be like, they be like, I can't move. It's just the ore is too strong. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like I feel like that's how I feel like when people be fighting John Jones, and they just be like, they get hit the conquerors hockey, or they be like, and for those that don't know, having total nerd moment, like it's an anime reference. Check it out. But but I feel like that's what happened in the Colby Covington Leon Edwards fight. Colby Covington got hit with the Conqueror's hockey, Leon Edwards' Conqueror hockey, and he said, I don't know what to do. Because it just like he made Colby Covington, who's the second best wrestler in the division, arguably one of the best in the organization, look like he was never supposed to be there. Like he looked like he was
Yeah.
supposed to be number 16 that like just happened to get a title shot.
Yeah.
Because
It's
Leon
he
Edwards,
completely like the grappling, and it's from that point on, he, he made him look like just an average striker that somehow got to the belt.
yeah, like, and then the times he did go for the legs, Leon said, bruh, I'm not just a regular striker no more.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like once you beat the best
Mm.
and you go to the second tier, it's just like you've already beat the game at extreme difficulty. Going to like uh really hard, once you beaten the game at extreme difficulty, or once you're beating the game at all Madden, while all pro is the second highest difficulty. Once you can beat the game at all Madden or extreme difficulty, playing the game at all pro, I mean, it's not gonna. You're gonna be like, hey, I got this. This is light work. So I think that the way he dismantled Kobe Covington, it was like the only challenge. I think the next challenge. I think that like for him, I think probably outside of in the welterweight division is Shavkat Rakhmonov. And
Mm.
I've been telling people about Shavkat for the last 4 years. It feels like back when he was on the prelims, I was like, this dude is something special. Again, another person from the very beginning I'd be having a gut feeling about. But outside of that, I don't think like someone can name someone in the welterweight division outside of Shavkat and MVP that Leon Edwards can't beat. You know what I mean? Like, but also he's been on a crazy win streak, like for a while now. Like the last time Leon Edwards lost was 2015 or 20, yeah, back when him and Kamaru Usman were brand new fighters. I think Kamaru Usman just came off the Ultimate Fighter the last time he lost. His last loss was to Kamaru Usman back when Kamaru just came off the Ultimate Fighter. That's how long ago this man has not tasted defeat in that long. So I think that like just yeah, the win streak he's been on, the work he's put on, the developments he's had from just being a kickboxer to being like a full rounded MMA fighter, and the people he's beaten, I think he goes like number three. Because I think that even if Islam were to move up, or even if he were to go up, I think he beats Duplessis. Like in that fight, I don't think it's a crazy fight where it's like, oh man, Duplessis is definitely gonna roll over Leon Edwards. I don't even, because it's one of those fights where I was like, oh, that would be a good fight, and I think that Leon Edwards stands a chance. Like I think he has. It's like I would say it's 70-30 Leon, maybe 60-40 Leon. But it's not one of those where it's like, oh, like what's his face moving up, like it's not a situation where someone would be like, oh, like Duplessis versus Alex Pereira.
Yeah.
I think Alex Pereira steamrolls Duplessis. That's like an
Yeah.
80-20 Pereira, maybe 100-0. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But like, so I would say Leon Edwards for number three. My number four, I would say Max Holloway. No, Charles Oliveira. I would say, yeah, Max Holloway for similar reasons that you said, that he's been in the UFC forever. He's been the champion. Prior to Volkanovski showing up, Max Holloway was the guy who was going to be the featherweight GOAT. A lot of people thought he was the featherweight GOAT. Remember the whole thing? I'm the best boxer in the UFC. Like because I feel like that was the fight against Calvin Kattar, right?
Yeah.
Broke a record for most strikes thrown, or like most significant strikes thrown. But just it goes to show you, like, the run that he was on. Like, he was considered to be the featherweight GOAT prior to Volkanovski. Just like, but I think it's one of those situations, just like how with DC and John Jones. DC is the light heavyweight GOAT if John Jones wasn't, if there wasn't a John Jones. Like, those are two phenomenal fighters. It's just when you have like a phenom and a top tier, like a legendary fighter, both in the same division at the same era, it's just like one's gonna be above the other, but then it's just like it can overshadow the other. Because John Jones definitely overshadowed DC, but like people don't, so much so that people don't really, they don't be realizing the work DC put in. DC was like only had like 2 losses or like 3 losses, one to John Jones and one to Stipe, which is the greatest heavyweight of all time and the greatest combat sport athlete of all time. You know what I mean? Just like Robert Whitaker and Adesanya, or like Holloway and Volkanovski. 2 phenomenal fighters. It just, I think that, and then the win at UFC 300 BMF, so he has a belt, still falls in my category of people with belts. So I do think that just the resume that he's put forth and everything he's done up to this point, a lot of the same points you said. Max Holloway is my number 4, and my number 5, Charles "Do Bronx" Oliveira. He doesn't have a belt, but he did have a belt, and I think he's close. Again, this is more feelings. I know we've been on this facts no feelings thing, but this is more feelings than facts. I think he's very close to being, like, I think the first 2-time lightweight champion. I don't think there's been a 2-time a person who's won the lightweight belt twice. But when you look at Charles Oliveira's just stats, the names he's beaten, his resume, he has the most submission wins, if I'm not mistaken, in UFC history. I think at 16, right? 16 submissions, or the most finishes at 16. And also, I think, if not mistaken, the second or third most highest, like, like for like bonuses and whatnot. So like, he's put up the numbers he's put up are numbers that's already at just, let me just double check. But like, the numbers Charles Oliveira has put up over the course of his career are all, he holds like 3 or 4 UFC records already. These are numbers that the numbers he's put up are numbers are already Hall of Fame worthy. And then on top of that, being the lightweight champion, and then also, this is just me. I think if you run that, because he was supposed to get that rematch against Islam Makhachev. I think if you run back that match between Islam Makhachev and Charles Oliveira, I highly doubt that match goes the same way again. Like, hey, Islam may pull a Leon versus Leon Edwards and win the second time even more decisively. But I highly doubt that it ends in the same fashion that it did the first time. Because I think maybe, this is just me, I think maybe Oliveira might have overestimated him the first time. Underestimated him the first time. What is the phrase? Underestimated, I think, right?
Yeah.
I think he underestimated him the first time. And then, might have gotten caught. But I think if you do that over again, I say 60-40, 70-30, Charles Oliveira, because I do think he is the better fighter. But I do think that it would be a closer fight. But I do think Charles still comes out on top. But the again, stats he has, the records he's had put forth, the resume of people he's beaten, I think that Charles Oliveira does go number 5. I mean, because Islam was my number 5, but once we could put in champions it was just people who were champion at one point, that bumped Islam to number 6. So he's still there, but like just right outside of the top 5. So yeah. Overall, John Jones at 1, Alex Pereira at 2, Leon Edwards at 3, Max Holloway at 4, Charles Oliveira at 5. Honorable mention to Islam at 6. Because if Charles Oliveira is probably my only top pound for pound person that's not a champion, but who was champion, who has put up a ridiculous amount of numbers and stats to say, hey, to like put their name up there. But
I think that's fine. I mean, like I said, it's the pound for pound list is something that is like personal and is like a your own kind of list. You know, it doesn't have to be like a consensus number one. It's supposed to be like a thing that's personal to you and like you can have your own reasons for. And I mean, I don't think it's that outrageous to like say, hey, I'm going to throw this one performance out in view of like a larger body of work. Like, I realize some people aren't going to like that, but to me, like, if you want to fall back on the larger sample size, I think that's fine. I think like until we see a rematch, and if like it's one-sided like it was again, then like at that point you have to kind of reconsider.
yeah,
But it's with just the one fight sample, I think that's enough that you could go like, yeah, we don't really know, you know?
because if they fight again and Islam performs like he did last time, then yeah, Islam's fine.
Yeah.
I'm gonna have to switch him out because I feel like you can't beat someone twice and not get put above them. You know what I mean? But then also, I do think that like Islam has potential, but I just right now he only has one title defense.
Yeah, like you said,
And
we just
then
need the
in his
body of
division,
work.
he has one title defense in his own division, and then 2 from beating one guy in a weight class lighter than him. And then, I mean, that guy is Alexander Volkanovski, but still, you're going against someone in a lighter division. Only one title defense. Great. I think he's a phenomenal wrestler, and like again, I think he's better overall. He has the striking, better all like but like Habib, very dominant. Like it's very easy to put Habib back in the day. Put Habib in near like your top 5, just because no one was doing it like he was. He was a wrestling phenom. Like he was doing it in such a dominant fashion. It's like who else are you putting in this? Like in this list? While Islam is maybe a better overall strike, like fighter. Man, he has a better striking and wrestling, but he in the time that he's been around and the things he's accomplished compared to the rest of the people on the list, stat wise, I think those people went out like John Jones, Alex Pereira. You know what I mean? The numbers like Leon, like Charles, Max Holloway, you know what I mean? All of them have numbers and stats that like stack up more. And like you said, it's a fun thing to be like, oh man, these are just my list and my personal. I think that's the interesting thing about pound for pound is everyone's going to have a different pound for pound. Because everyone's going to have their own different reasons why this fighter should be over this fighter, why this fighter should be on this list, why that fighter should be on that list. I think the general consensus, though, is John Jones is number 1.
Yeah.
I feel like I feel like 2 through 5, it could be a list of anybody. like it's gonna be generally probably gonna be different 2 through 5, but I feel like generally number one, people are gonna just choose John Jones just because look at the body of work that you know what
Yeah.
I mean? Like, but yeah, I feel like it's gonna be different regardless of those 2 through 5. It could be a variety of things. Me and you had different lists
Yeah.
generally of like the 2 through 5, and we're both big fans of it. But whenever you talk to someone, even when I talk to other people outside, um, I talked to 4 people, and all 4 of them had different lists. I
Yeah.
talked to like 4 people at one time. All 4 of them had different people on the list. The general consensus is that everyone chose John Jones as number one, but the
Mhm.
2 through 5 was all different.
Yeah. Well, that's the fun about it, in that it's able to promote conversation
Yeah,
between like all levels of MMA fans and
yeah,
like
exactly.
bring more to it. And that's what it's. I just hope that moving forward, even if most of us would agree that John's number one, it's not like a bargaining that gets like serious and heated between like the
Yeah,
and all these people. Like it's supposed to be a fun thing.
yeah, I agree. It definitely is supposed to be a fun thing. I don't think it should be anything to get super bent out of shape about, because I feel that like if someone's like arguing like I'm not three, I'm two, you're still not number one.
Yeah.
I feel like one is probably like the only, and the one is held by an obvious person. But I feel that like I think yeah, it's not something. I think it's like one of those things like when someone's like, because even like the Goku Superman thing, people be like, Goku Superman, da da da. This in the end, both of them are dope characters, but this is never gonna happen. And at no point is it gonna like have any anything that precedence in that person's life to be like, oh man, you chose Goku, you chose Superman. Here's this promotion. It is just a fun thing to chat with friends and be like, oh man, who would win this, Batman or the Justice League? You know. But move, but swinging on forward, because for the reason why I'm wearing, wait, can I, wait, where is this? Yeah, this
Here.
jersey. I had to make sure I was on the right side of the camera. Um, wearing this Japan jersey tonight. Fight the main event. Uh, UF. What is this? UFC Fight Night Vegas '93. I think.
Yep.
At the UFC Apex, Tatsuro Taira from Japan, the Supernova. I believe that's his nickname. Supernova. Boom, going against Alex Perez. Been calling this from the beginning. Tatsuro Taira, another person I've been banging this drum about since he was like on the early prelims, that he's gonna be a future champion. He's getting his chance, his first main event, undefeated in the UFC, 15-0. I think 6-0 in the UFC. Um, Before I go on my soapbox about Tatsuya Taira and why I think he is gonna win, become future champion. I'm gonna let you get your thoughts out on this
Okay.
because before I get on my soapbox.
So I'll just give a little bit of like background on his opponent, Alex Perez,
Mhm.
who's going to be like a lesser known
It's a good
kind of,
balance.
yeah, he's the kind of B side to this kind of fight. It's since he's been in the UFC, his only losses are to the kind of who's who of uh of 125. So he lost Joseph Benavidez in 2018. He lost to Davison Figueiredo in 2020. He lost to Alessandro Pantoja in 2022, and he lost to Muhammad Makayev in 2024. So it's
It's a solid
if you
list.
yeah, it's if you are like a title contender slash champ, it's you beat Alex Perez has been how it's gone historically. But he is coming off his last fight. He knocked out Mateusz Nicolau in the second round. So he does have some momentum coming off of his last fight. It was another fight night where he was in the main event, so he was scheduled for 5 rounds. So presumably he prepared for it, even though it didn't get to it. So this is a good test for Tatsuro Taira of if it goes that long, his cardio and what he's like in a main event atmosphere, being the last one to walk, getting that experience against a guy who's 32 years old, who's been there and done that against other sort of top end of the flyweight division, and who can give him that kind of rub to see if he's ready for the next level and to go compete for titles.
Mm-hmm.
And if you want me to pick it, I think he is. I think everything that we've seen, like it's the way in which he has fought and shown himself at just 24 years of age in the UFC already in his 5 fights. It's he's showing everything that you would want, and I hope that the UFC is using this as a platform along with the Ryzen champion that they just got to come over. I hope that they're viewing this as an opportunity to really gain some momentum, like they did with Mexico, but now in Japan, and hopefully like showing up for the Japanese fan base and giving them a reason to come back and support the UFC. In my opinion, which would be great to go back to Japan and get in those arenas and put on those shows that are really unique to Japan. It's I think like when you think of some of the best atmospheres that MMA has, I think Japan is on the list in the top 5 for sure. And it would be a great thing for the UFC to be back and big in Japan. And I think that this kid can be a part of it.
Yeah, I agree. I think Alex Perez will be Tatsuro Taira's biggest challenge yet. And I think it will be his, like you said, all the people you named before. If you want to be a champion, you want to be a contender, you got to go through Alex Perez. Because the names that you named off are like big names right now in the division. Like going forward, believe Taira is number 13 and Alex Perez holds number 5. Even though it's a big jump in competition, if Tatsuro Taira can beat Perez, not if but when, oh, all jokes aside, but if he can beat him, that puts him in the top 5. That means he is 1-2 fights away from a title fight and becoming the first Japanese champion. And for me, I'm always gonna support other like Japanese fighters. I gotta support just like fellow like Nihonjin, like going at whether it's when it comes to the World Cup, always rock with Team USA, Team Japan, gotta support my countries, so whenever I do come, or like when new wrestlers come around, I'm always gonna support I try to support the wrestlers. And it's been a while since Japan has had some like representation in the UFC, where I think that fighters like Tatsuro Taira and Rinya Nakamura and like the rising champ that coming over, I think that could breathe new life into the UFC, the Japanese representation of like UFC fighters, like breathing new life into it, where like just like how Mexico's had this like this really like dope, awesome surge of like fighters coming out of Mexico who are like really putting on these amazing shows and putting on for like the country and like the Mexican fan base. Where they're when you see like Alexa Grasso, you see the like what's the I don't know why I forgot his name. I'm sorry. The guy Brian Ortega fought.
Yair Rodriguez?
Yeah. Yair Rodriguez. Sorry about that. Yair Rodriguez, Alexa Grasso, Brandon Moreno. I got that one name stuck in my head and I couldn't move past into the other names. But yeah, Yair Rodriguez, Alexa Grasso, Brandon Moreno, you have like Brian Ortega, all those like just some really dope fighters. Um,
Loopy,
which Lupi
Loopy.
Godinez, yeah, like there's a lot. So I think it's been really dope to see um the surge in Mexican MMA, and I think that like because I think that it's been a while since the UFC's had some like big stars as far as like Japanese fighters, because like I know when I first got into sport, way back, it was like way back in the day where like, the Yushin Okamis, the Yoshihiro Akiyamas, the like Takanori Gomis, which was considerably long away, you know what I mean? Uh, where I would like put like Lyoto Machida in there, but like I think that's it's been a while, and then for a while there was pretty much it was pretty non-existent as far as like Japanese fighters in the UFC. But to see Tatsuro Tada and Rinya Nakamura kind of really kind of like uh, putting on, putting in work and putting on for like the country or whatnot. So I think it's really dope to see both of them being so young and really becoming like standouts in their divisions. For Tatsuro Tada, yeah, for him being so young and doing what he has done so far is really impressive to see. Um, a little backstory on Tatsuro Tada, if you guys, in case you guys didn't know. So he was already undefeated and like doing really well in Japan. Came over to fight in the UFC, and normally you have to go through the routes. You can go through like the Ultimate Fighter, the Contender Series to kind of like prove yourself, and then win the contract, get on. And to my understanding, that was his intent, like an original intention, is to like do the Ultimate Fighter or like do like Contender Series, and was training in the gym, a gym here in the US, and was just really dope. Like I guess the people he was training with, there were some UFC guys there, really fighters and whatnot. They were really impressed with what they were seeing, and he got signed. They signed him. They went ahead and signed him to the UFC, and like allowing him to kind of like, they were just like, hey, you know what? Don't even worry about all fighter. Consider, hey, we're gonna sign you off top, and we'll see what you're about. And he's, I would say, has had dominant performances in all six of his fights, whether it was submission wins, and normally when you see grapplers, submission fighters, there's usually, it's kind of a slow process, you kind of like going for this, going for that. But I feel like he's all action, where he's kind of like, okay, going for this, going for that. Okay, that's not working. Let's go for this. And he's been winning a lot. Up until the last fight, he had a lot of people were like, okay, as long as you don't go to the ground, you should be safe. And then he had that left hook, kind of dropped his opponent, had that win by like TKO, which kind of like showing like the development of his game, where he's not just a grappler submission artist. He's actually he has knockout power. He is growing as a fighter, becoming more well-rounded as a mixed martial artist. So I think this is his biggest challenge to date, because this is his first main event. His To go from prospect to contender, from rising prospect to like promise, to contender, like a promising contender for the belt, to go from 13 to 5. Generally, people who get title shots are in between 1 and 5. And if I'm not mistaken, Pantoja's flyweight champion, right?
Mm-hmm.
Again, maybe just me, but I think kind of beats, if he, I think he can do it. I think he can beat Pantoja if it came down to it. Pantoja is a great fighter, but I have faith in Tyler and his skills. And I think, again, just like how I thought like Alexa Grasso beating Valentina, Juliana Pena beating Amanda Nunes, Leon Edwards beating Usman, I just feel it in my gut. I feel like this is it's his time. And because John Jones won the belt at 24, right? Or 23, to become youngest UFC champion.
John was 23.
Okay, so second youngest. It's not too bad either. But yeah, the very excited for the fight. Very excited to see him kind of do his thing and kind of fulfill his potential. So yeah, I think that this would be cool. I think that if he were to go out there and put a stamp on this fight, just like he has the other ones, I've heard that there was talks about going to Japan and doing a UFC back in Japan, which I think would be really cool. How they did that whole video package of when they went back to Brazil for the first time in a while. I think that would be really cool to kind of see. And right now, I think you make him the main event for that card. Because there's not a whole lot of Japanese fighters on the card in the UFC right now, but I think you put Taira versus whoever, maybe that is the title fight against Pantoja, or whoever is next. Then you co-main event, you put Rinya Nakamura against whoever it is. Again, a wrestler who I'm always gonna support the wrestlers. Generally I try to do that. But I know that they just got someone new. I think Rei Suruya or something like that, who's also undefeated. Maybe you put him there and then stack the card however else. But I think that could be cool to see the first UFC Japan in a while. So yeah, I think that'd be cool to be able to go back. But again, can't look past Alex Perez because he is a serious opponent, and this will be his biggest test. But all hopes that he can get the job done, move up to number 5, maybe take one more fight, and then it's off to get that belt, become the how Conor became the first Irish champion. Taira might become the first Japanese champion. So that would be pretty cool to see.
Okay, well let's call the outcome then. It's do you see a finish and what round?
I say Taira by second round submission. Second round finish, because he has one knockout and mostly submissions, so I don't know as far as knockout submissions, but I'm gonna say second round finish.
Okay, I'm gonna go with. I'll also go Taira, and I'll go. I think this might go to the 4th. I think we might see the beginning of the championship rounds. I think in the 4th, he'll impose. In the first few rounds, he'll impose that grappling style, make Perez work under him. Perez will put up some good defense early, but Taira will just wear him down. And then in the 4th, he'll present him a submission and he'll take full advantage. And we'll be talking about a new phenom rising in the featherweight division, or not featherweight, flyweight.
Yeah, I think that because I could see that. The reason I say second round is when I was looking at Alex Perez's fights, generally they're first round wins or losses, if I remember correctly. At least the ones I saw that were wins are first round wins. So I feel like it, and then Tata's pretty fast paced as well. So I think maybe somewhere in the first or second. But I'm gonna say second. But I wouldn't be surprised if they go.
Yeah, I'm just thinking because both of them are kind of all action. They might try and pace themselves because it will be scheduled for 5 rounds. So
true.
That was my thinking on that. But I think we're about out of time.
Yep. And so if you've listened to this song, we appreciate you. I hope you had a good time listening. We had a good time recording. If you please subscribe, tell your friends, do all that. Other than that, yeah. Hope you guys have a great evening, great day, great morning, whenever you are listening to this, wherever you are in the world. But yeah, have a good one, everyone. I don't know if the thing shows up. Okay, cool. See y'all.